Thank you. Irvine, I love it here. This is where you come when you've made it. You've made it. There's a Ferris wheel. We've made it. Whenever you're having a bad day, do you just like sit on it and it brightens you up? And you're like, I'm in Irvine. Things are okay.
One afternoon in August 1672, Johan de Witt walks through the gates of the prison in The Hague to visit his brother Cornelis, imprisoned under false accusations of treason. Johan knows the times are dangerous. Public discontent, fueled by rumors and propaganda, has made him and his brother the targets of collective hatred. But nothing could have prepared him for what is about to happen. Shortly after his arrival, the calm outside the prison shatters. An enraged mob storms the building, dragging both brothers out of their cell. The crowd's roar is deafening. There is no trial, no mercy. In front of a vengeance-hungry mob, Johan and Cornelis are brutally beaten, tortured, and executed. But the violence doesn't stop there. Their mutilated bodies are hung upside down on an improvised gibbet, displayed as grotesque trophies. Fingers, ears, and other body parts are cut off, sold as macabre souvenirs, and according to legend, some of their remains were even consumed by cannibals. The scene is beyond description. Blood, chaos, a crowd celebrating as if at a festival. Yet amidst this terrifying spectacle, one man watches, not with horror, but with a clear purpose. From the shadows, he studies every detail, every gesture, every trace of tragedy, because what he is witnessing will become one of the most shocking and haunting works in the history of art. This painting, The Corpses of De Witt Brothers, created by Jan de Beyen, is not just a depiction of horror, it is a window into humanity's darkest side. It is much worse than any horror movie. But who were the De Witt brothers? What happened to them? And how did they end up being portrayed in such a brutal manner? Cornelis and Johan de Witt were prominent figures in the politics of the Dutch Republic during its golden age. Cornelis, born in 1623 in Dordrecht, came from a wealthy patrician family. He served as the burgomaster of his hometown, a member of the States of Holland and West Frisia, and held the position of Ruud, a role combining the responsibilities of chief of police and prosecutor. Cornelis was known for his bravery in naval battles, such as the raid on Medway in 1667 and the Battle of Solebay in 1672. However, his declining health and the growing influence of the pro-monarchy Orange faction began to erode his power. He was arrested on false charges of treason and, despite enduring torture, never confessed. Ultimately, he was sentenced to exile. Johan de Witt, on the other hand, was a charismatic and visionary political leader. As Grand Pensionary, he played a crucial role in the administration of the Republic during its economic and political peak. He was a staunch defender of the Republic and firmly opposed Prince William III of Orange, which made him a target of the monarchist factions. In 1672, known as the Rampjaar, or Year of Disaster, France and England declared war against the Dutch Republic. While the Dutch army was weak, the public blamed Johan for the military defeats. This led to the rise of William III of Orange, who was called upon by the people to take leadership. On August 20th, 1672, Johan visited his brother Cornelis in the prison of The Hague. That day, both were attacked by an enraged mob that brutally murdered them. The mob beat the brothers with hammers, dismembered them, castrated them, and hung their mutilated bodies upside down on an improvised gibbet. Some parts of their bodies were sold as souvenirs, and there are even accounts of cannibalism. The brutality of the murders was documented in historical records, including reports that the brothers' hearts were preserved in turpentine and displayed as trophies. The corpses of the Witt brothers is a stark and raw depiction of this event. On the back of the painting, there is an inscription that reads, "These are the corpses of Jan and Cornelis de Witt, painted from life by a famous artist as they hung from the whip at 11 p.m. Cornelis is the one without a wig. Johan has his own hair." This painting is absolutely chilling. I mean, it was clearly painted around 11 at night, and it feels like it was done almost in real time. If cameras had existed back then, this would be like an instant snapshot. In the scene, there's a man at the front holding a torch, illuminating these poor mutilated figures. There they are, exposed in utterly heartbreaking nakedness, hanging from an improvised gibbet. In the background, dark trees and a stormy night sky. Everything in this image screams oppression. Honestly, even the air feels heavy just looking at it. And yes, I say heartbreaking, because that's the first word that comes to mind. Think about it. These were two men who gave everything for their country, national heroes. And how did they end up? Through a mix of bad luck and a cruel twist of fate, they look like someone roasted them on a spit and then hung them up as decorations. If you focus on their faces, at least Johan's, which is the most visible, you can see how horrifying this is. His nose is cut off, his eyes gouged out, and his head is completely shattered. Horrible? No, this goes beyond horrendous. Then you move down his body, and it's a complete mess. He's disemboweled, his fingers and toes are cut off. But the most disturbing part, at least for me, is that he was castrated. Yes, they cut everything off. There's just a tiny bit of tendon sticking out where his genitals should be. It's one of those details you simply can't get out of your head, no matter how hard you try. This painting, while impressive in execution, is simply heartbreaking. Horrific and heartbreaking. It's like comparing this to Goya's Saturn devouring his son. That painting captures the ferocity of the moment. But this is the cold, somber tragedy of the aftermath. The way the light illuminates the scene is incredibly well done, but the message it leaves is grim. Now, as for whether Jan de Beyen really painted this, there's no signature on the piece, but most people agree it was him. He was there at the time, he knew the De Witt brothers, and honestly, who else would create something so brutal with this level of detail? To this day, the horror of that night remains alive, literally. The tongue and finger of the De Witt brothers are still preserved and displayed as historical artifacts. It's crazy to think that these remains, which feel straight out of a horror movie, are physical reminders of just how brutal an uncontrolled mob can be. And speaking of the painting, this artwork still sends chills down the spine of anyone who looks at it. Today, it resides in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, where you can come face to face with this dark piece of history. The painting doesn't just depict the extreme violence of that night, it forces you to reflect on how twisted power and politics can become. It's not just a painting, it's a brutal reminder of how far humanity can fall when control is lost. Another question that comes to mind after analyzing this painting is, what could the cat symbolize? Do you think it plays a role in this scene, or is it simply a silent witness to human atrocity? Let me know in the comments. Can you imagine having a reproduction of this painting or another equally impactful historical masterpiece in your home? In our catalogue, you'll find high-quality reproductions in various sizes and finishes, perfect for lovers of art and history. Shipping is completely free worldwide. And the best part? By purchasing from the store, you're not only getting a piece to last a lifetime, but you're also directly supporting this channel, helping me continue to create videos like the one you just watched. So, if you're as passionate about art as I am, check out the link in the description. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.
There are 3 new items in the Horses store. Check them out at horses.land. Thank you. I hope you enjoy this video. These 14 works make up a series called the Black Paintings by the Spanish artist Francisco Goya. They were massive murals depicting horrific scenes of decay, destruction, and suffering. They were painted directly on the walls of the artist's home. Nobody was supposed to see the black paintings. They were never intended for public view. They do not have titles. They were not commissioned by anyone. Goya never spoke or wrote about them. He never told any of his friends or family members about the paintings, and there are virtually no records of their existence from
Very
Goya's
good. You
life.
can keep going, Simon says.
So, why did the artist make them? How did Goya go from painting idyllic works like this to works like this? Why would any individual choose to adorn their walls with paintings of cannibalism, witchcraft, and sorrow? The trajectory of Goya's work follows a well-trodden narrative about an artist descending into madness. But this is, put simply, a poor explanation for the black paintings. The descent into madness tale does not just do a disservice to Goya's paintings, but to art, and perhaps even to humanity itself. We will get to that conversation, but for now, let's start with Francisco Goya. Francisco Goya was born in 1746 in Fuentedoros, Spain. Although born into limited means, Goya found immense fame as a painter throughout his life. He was often commissioned by royals for portraiture, and as an artist, Goya was the subject of near universal acclaim. This video is about Goya's black paintings, but to understand these works, we must understand how Goya arrived at them. They were not created in a vacuum, but instead as a reaction to a myriad of circumstances. As wonderfully as things were going within Goya's career, the same could not be said for his country. In 1789, the French Revolution was sending shockwaves into Spain. The Spanish government attempted to stamp out these revolutionary ideas, and Spanish sympathizers were forced into hiding. Goya himself sided with the left-leaning revolutionaries, but his life materially depended on commissions from the Spanish crown. This crisis of conscience did not create the black paintings, but it is perhaps the very first straw on the camel's back. In 1793, a mysterious disease left Goya completely deaf. Shortly after losing his hearing, Goya underwent an intense depressive episode. His work became darker and more pessimistic, focusing on human suffering and the cruelties of the world. This is captured perfectly in his 1794 painting Yard with Lunatics. In the work, Goya depicts patients in a mental institution. Strikingly, the building seems to be outside. The sun is shining brightly in the entire upper portion of the canvas, and yet the figures are all bathed only in darkness. Externally, the situation in Spain was worsening as well. Ferdinand VII took power, and under his reign, Spain entered into a civil war. Goya attempted to leave the capital city of Madrid on 2 occasions, but was both times threatened with the seizure of his property and the loss of his job. So he stayed in the capital, where he held a unique and bizarre relationship to the conflict. On one hand, he was painting for the new invading king. On the other, Spanish generals invited Goya to document the struggles of their soldiers. All the while, Goya witnessed firsthand the terror of the Civil War. During this time, he produced a series called The Disasters of War, which are a direct precursor to the black paintings. It's hard to say exactly when Goya began Disasters of War, but the earliest entry is dated to 1810. The works are most obviously about the War of Independence, but they are also about war in its totality. Goya's disasters omit references to real people, places, or events, much like his later black paintings. Instead, they portray the everyday sufferings of a population ripped apart by violence. In the series, Goya is not interested in arguments over a just or unjust war. Rather, he seems to portray war as fundamentally wrong. The war is not an error on the part of the Spanish or the invading forces, but error on the part of humanity itself. This philosophy, this pessimistic view of humankind, is the thread which carries Goya through to his black paintings. The horrors of war, the human suffering in his etchings, were not temporary, but rather quite permanent. They became a hinge around which his creative process seemed to turn. With the political situation becoming more oppressive and his health continuing to decline, Goya purchased a house in the countryside. By this time, Goya's creative voice had entirely entered a world of darkness. This would soon culminate in the black paintings. In 1819, Goya fell seriously ill once again. He recovered, but would live the rest of his days in severe mental anguish over a relapse and the looming threat of death. It is likely that after his recovery, Goya began work on the black paintings. These paintings were applied directly to the walls of his home. Modern X-rays have shown that beneath the black paintings there were pleasant murals of nature and country life. It's unclear if Goya painted these murals, but no matter the case, the black paintings represent a deliberate desire to cross out the idyllic with the macabre. These 14 paintings do not depict flesh and blood events. They are not images of things occurring in the world as far as we know. Instead, they are a reflection of mood, of Goya's own internal state of being. Amid the wars, political turmoil, and failing health, the black paintings offer a private glimpse inside the mind of Francisco Goya. Saturn devouring his son is likely the most famous of the black paintings. In subject, it depicts the myth of Kronos, who was later renamed to Saturn by the Romans. In that story, Kronos believes one of his sons will usurp his throne, and so Kronos devours the infant at birth. The narrative is obviously interesting, but it is Goya's depiction which demands attention. Earlier, more traditional depictions of this scene, like this one from Peter Paul Rubens, show Saturn as cruel and malevolent. For a more direct comparison, we can look to an earlier work by Goya himself. Years before creating the black paintings, Goya produced a chalk drawing of Saturn devouring his son. In the drawing, Saturn looks every bit as violent as Rubens, and he is depicted with two bodies, as if his ruthlessness has a procedural quality to it. But in Goya's later painting, it is hard to see any bit of cruelty on Saturn's face. Instead, he looks afraid. Saturn stares at the viewer as if being caught in an act most deplorable. We are afraid of the monster, and the monster is afraid of us. The damage is already done. The figure he holds is bloodied and headless. Saturn, who we would see as the monster, is horrified by himself. The bright lighting puts Saturn in a spotlight against the black background. It feels as if we have interrupted something. But when we examine the tale of Saturn against Goya's work, we find huge inconsistencies. In the story, Saturn is devouring a newborn child. The body being eaten in Goya's painting, though, is quite clearly an adult. The shape of the body could even suggest that it is a woman as well, rather than a son. The Titan Kronos is also representative of time. Perhaps Goya's Saturn is time, the passing of time, and all of mankind's machinations, devouring humanity itself. But the painting lacks the typical iconography that would be associated with Saturn. Constellations, hourglasses, and scythes are conspicuously absent. Artists are inclined to take creative liberties, certainly. But one possible explanation for these inconsistencies is also that the painting does not depict Saturn. Goya did not title the painting. Historians today have given it that title and anointed it that subject matter, but this is just a theory. It's quite possible that Goya did not paint Saturn. So, what did he paint? Goya and his wife had between 5 and 20 children. No one really knows the exact number, but only one survived beyond childhood, their son Javier. From Javier's earliest days, Goya doted over the boy. Goya wrote poetic letters to his friends about his son. When his wife died, Goya gave virtually all of his belongings and paintings to Javier. After Javier married into a wealthy family, Goya still took financial responsibility for the child. Nearing the end of his life, Goya was spending all of his money on his son. The father had grand hopes that Javier would devote himself to art, but that did not happen. When we look at a portrait of the 21-year-old Javier done by Goya, we perhaps see how Goya viewed his child. The boy is handsome, but he is childlike, pretty, and his expression is even aloof. The painting does not render Javier as strong or determined, but instead as a well-to-do, unconcerned youth. Perhaps Saturn is a reflection of Goya's own strained, disappointing relationship with his son, or an allegory for the children Goya lost. But I think to prescribe such specific meaning to works of art is often a misled endeavor, and as we continue to look at the black paintings, this does become a good thesis on the works. Witches' Sabbath is another iconic painting from the period. In the work, a goat, likely Satan, presides over a coven of witches who look horrified and distraught at the scene. The shortest of the witches, sitting next to Satan, has been suggested to be a child or an infant being prepared for some kind of ritual. The witches are painted in unflattering forms. They are grotesque and twisted in their renderings. Still, though, the painting offers very little in the way of outright condemnation of witchcraft specifically. Instead, it just shows some ritual as Goya would have imagined it. The setting is vague at very best. It seems clear that the events are occurring outside, but the viewer knows little more than that. This was not the first time Goya painted witchcraft. His arguably more famous work from several years prior shows a similar scene. He depicted witches in a few other works. Goya was a staunch liberal, and he fiercely opposed the work of the Spanish Inquisition. His paintings of witches are generally accepted as silent protests to the Inquisition. This one is no exception. In another famous piece from the black paintings, Goya's subject matter shifts from the cosmic and mythical to the mundane and even crass. Two women and a man seems to depict a man masturbating to the mockery or humor of two peasant women. Just like in Saturn and Sabbath, the painting is set against an ambiguous black background. The scene could be playing out anywhere at all. Goya has disfigured all of the faces. Whether they are jovial, embarrassed, or something else entirely, they have become grotesque and horrific depictions of human emotion. There is also two friars, which seems to depict a monk alongside some vaguely bestial figure. While the bearded figure looks contemplative and receptive in the painting as it exists today, this is a result of changes during the restoration process. In early photos of the paintings on Goya's walls, the bearded man seems dark, brooding, and even standoffish. The whispering figure has been better preserved. He barely looks human. Some historians have suggested him as a metaphor for time or death itself. One of the most mysterious paintings of the series is Two Old People Eating. Historians do not know where this was painted in the home, nor do they entirely understand what is going on in the painting. The work shows two figures, one holding a spoon who seems to be a woman. She is grinning widely, though her smile does not look particularly amicable. The other figure looks on, if he is even alive at all. Here we have what would be a charming domestic scene,